Hey friends, this is video number 2. This is Colossians chapter 1. If you missed the overview video, please go back and check that one out because that's going to give you really good context for Colossians chapter 1 and kind of moving forward. But essentially in Colossians 1, I mean, there are so many things that we could get to. There is, just a word here and there that we could spend all of our time in. And I can't really get to all those things in this video. So I would encourage you, if you have a study Bible, go verse by verse, read commentaries, read context, all those different things, so that it can kind of help you. And maybe in your life group meeting, you decide you're going to go a totally different direction than this video, and that's great. I mean, we trust you to lead, and if God is kind of leading you in another direction, please feel free to do that. And so there are also other resources you could utilize. The Bible Project is a really good one. If you go on YouTube, you can check out their overview of Colossians. You can also find many different references and things on YouTube, on Google, and all that good stuff. So essentially what we want to get to here is there's really 3 main sections of Colossians chapter 1. You have the introduction that he gives. You have the preeminence of Christ is kind of the second section. And then the third one is Paul talking about his ministry and his suffering. So that's a very brief part to end chapter 1. But let's go to the introduction. So in the introduction, you see these words like faith, hope, love, grace. You see this posture of joy and humility and gratitude that really ought to mark the life of a believer. And again, Paul is in chains right now. Paul is in prison right now. In fact, it is this posture of gratitude and understanding sort of the bigger picture that allows him then to say, hey, I can rejoice in my sufferings. I know that because Christ is preeminent, because he is above it all, because he is bringing about this new kingdom and this new way forward, that God is actually using this for that. And that's a good thing. And that's one of the things, by the way, that is so important about the writings of Paul is when he talks about this new kingdom, when Jesus talks about this new kingdom, it's not just a new kingdom, it's an entirely different way forward. I mean, it's, when we get into Colossians 3, he talks about the differences between like old kingdoms of the past and then this new kingdom. And really the point here is in Colossians 1, 13 and 14, he says, he has delivered us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. So now, kingdoms of the past talked about like dominating and literal and physical and outward positions, right? And now what he's talking about here in Colossians 1, 13, 14, he's talking about the real emphasis is having reconciliation with God. That this kingdom actually is more of an unseen kingdom, that there is sin in our lives, and it doesn't matter if you're the highest ruler or the lowest peasant, it really doesn't matter. The issue is our sin, and we all have sin deep within us. And so we can't do like kingdoms of the past and just try to outwardly, make things look good. Kind of like what we talked about on Christmas Day, about you can't just make things look good. They have to actually be good. And in order for that to happen, you have to look inward. And when you look inward, you realize that there's nothing within me that can actually accomplish reconciliation with God. And so Paul is saying this is such good news that Jesus has come. He is the way to reconciliation with God. So while other kingdoms are literal and physical and outward, this kingdom is unseen, but it is so transcendent of the seen reality. And so that's why Paul can end the chapter saying, I rejoice in my sufferings. I mean, I know that my reality right now is I'm in chains, but there is a transcendent reality. There's an ultimate reality here at play, and I'm a part of it, and this is a part of it, and I can rejoice because this is actually advancing that kingdom. And so that's the mindset, and that's the mindset that we want to be in. is how can we be of a setting our minds on things above, like Colossians 3 mindset, where we just say, whatever it is, like this is about the unseen kingdom, not the seen kingdom. And so I do want to touch on a couple of quick hitting things of this chapter. One is this word firstborn of all creation. Now this caused quite a stir in the early church because many interpreted Paul's words to mean that there was God the Father at the beginning, but then he created God the Son, and symbolically the Holy Spirit, conceives Jesus. And so a lot of people thought that this was a symbolism into, the Father in the beginning conceiving the Son. And so essentially, in order to break that theology, we have to go back to the original Greek and what firstborn actually means. Firstborn doesn't mean the literal birth of that time. It means first in rank. And that's an extremely important thing because he's the one that we submit everything to. He's above the rulers, the authorities, or any other thing that we might worship. So we think of him not as firstborn in terms of like a timing of the Father conceives the Son. No, he was there at the beginning. He is in the Father. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He's there in the very beginning. In fact, Paul would go on to say that what does he say? He's before all things. He is in the beginning. He is the beginning. He goes before all things. So keep that in mind as you read. Sometimes people stumble over that firstborn because he says that a couple of times, depending on your translation. Also, verse 18, sit there for a minute, that he is the head. What does that mean? How is that so important for us to see? Well, it's symbolic. I mean, if we are the body and he is the head, that means the body takes orders from the head. And so what does that look like? Maybe we spend some time on that question. What does it look like for us to get our signals to do anything from the head, that is Christ? Also, I think verses 21 and 22, again, when you understand the context that we were alienated from God, but Christ has reconciled us. Now, that's a big moment for everybody, but especially for the Jewish Christians of the time, like we talked about in the overview, that it's not by keeping the law. You just can't do it by keeping the law. You have no righteousness of your own. We're reconciled to the Father through the Son, and that's the only way forward. So now for Life Group, if you've read ahead, there could be I always like to do some good open-ended questions to kind of process through in Life Group. And so one of those could be, how is it that Paul could rejoice in his sufferings? I mean, what would it look like for us to be able to respond the same way if we were in prison on account of the gospel? Maybe do some self-reflection of, could I really get to a point, objectively, could I really get to a point where I say, man, I rejoice that I'm suffering right now, only because, not because we're, some, people that just want to suffer. It's because we see that it's actually advancing the gospel. And so, is Christ preeminent? Is this unseen kingdom transcendent? That's really a question maybe to process through. Another question is, what theologies or ideologies or things of the world can get in the way of us clinging to Christ's preeminence? How can we help each other keep the main thing essentially, and not let Christ simply be a God in our lives, but the God? Because again, remember when God says he doesn't want any other gods before him, he doesn't mean he's number one and then the next thing, number 2, 3, 4. What he's saying is, he says, I don't want any other gods in my presence at all. I don't want them in my presence. I want everything I want to be the thing. I want to be the God in your life, and I want everything else to flow from that truth. So how can we kind of make those things that get in the way of his preeminence in our lives? How can we kind of help each other to not allow that to happen? So that's essentially chapter 1. Again, it's a kind of a weak overview of chapter 1. So get into it yourself and have a good time. And I'll send out chapter 2 probably within the coming days. So